Please stop smoothing every edge. Please stop calming every spike. Please stop settling every sensation as quickly as possible. That's happening everywhere in the mind-body spaces, and they're calling that nervous system health. But what they're actually doing most of the time is training avoidance with better language. Okay, before we go further, this is yet another conversation where it really helps to know how your system tends to deal with pressure in the first place. Some nervous systems will chronically overactivate, others chronically dampen. And if you've never looked at your pattern directly, the Somatic Skins Quiz can give you a useful read on where you default. This is not a personality quiz or put yourself in a box. It's just that without that clarity, people will often try to regulate what actually needs to be confronted or challenged. Okay, so here's the biological issue with what I was just saying. Regulation is just not the same as resilience. Regulation is a state. Resilience is a capacity. One helps you to feel better in the moment, and the other determines what you can handle when the moment really doesn't care how you feel. A nervous system does not become stronger by always returning to calm. It becomes stronger by learning that it can remain organized when pressure is present. That learning only happens through resistance. Resistance does not mean chaos, and it doesn't mean just pushing against. It doesn't mean overwhelm. It means a demand that requires that the system adapts instead of retreats. Something that pushes against an existing limit, your edge, without blowing past them. When resistance is removed entirely, the nervous system, it never updates its threat map. So the same stressors continue to hit in the exact same way year after year, no matter how many calming practices you stack on top. And who needs all that? This is where overregulation, it just quietly sabotages people and weighs them down after a while. If every spike in sensation is immediately soothed, slowed, explained, or softened, the system never learns that it can survive intensity. It learns that intensity is bad and has to be eliminated as fast as possible. So what happens? Tolerance shrinks. Thresholds lower. Caution comes in, even in being yes to spaces or opportunities that will ask you to expand yourself. And so ordinary, everyday stress, it starts feeling extraordinary. People become very good at calming themselves and very bad at handling life. This will show up in subtle ways. You see it when someone can regulate beautifully under controlled conditions, but they fall apart under time pressure. When they have excellent tools for self-soothing, but almost no ability to stay present and engaged in conflict. When discomfort is treated as a signal to withdraw from that space rather than a stimulus to engage and adapt. Biologically, what's happening is really simple. The nervous system adapts through stress exposure, followed by recovery. Not endless stress, but not endless recovery. The alternating current matters. When you introduce resistance, physical load, breath restriction, sustained attention, relational tension, stress hormones rise. The system mobilizes. If the exposure is dosed correctly and then followed by real recovery, the nervous system learns that this level of pressure is doable. And that's how capacity increases. If resistance never arrives and life is just soft all around, the system has no reason to reorganize. So calm becomes the only safe space. Anything outside of that feels threatening, regardless of how benign or beneficial it actually is. This is why some people become dependent on regulation practices. They need to downshift constantly because they've never trained themselves to stay upshifted without imploding. Resistance is the missing ingredient, not as punishment or toughness theater, but as information. Resistance teaches the nervous system where its real edges actually are, where the breath collapses under load, whether attention fragments when stakes rise, whether posture compensates or organizes, whether recovery actually just clears stress or pauses it for later. Without resistance, you're guessing. And here's the part that usually lands the hardest. If you always regulate away from discomfort, you also regulate away from growth, because growth lives precisely at the edge of what the system can tolerate while staying present. That edge is uncomfortable by definition, because that's where learning is happening. This doesn't mean that you abandon regulation. It just means that you stop using regulation as an excuse to avoid challenge. Regulation becomes what allows you to enter resistance deliberately, not escape it reflexively. That's a really different relationship to calm. Calm then can stop being the goal. Capacity becomes the goal. This is why real somatic training alternates pressure and recovery, why physical disciplines use load, why breath practices sometimes restrict instead of just soothe and center, and why attention training involves staying with difficulty rather than immediately dissolving it. It's also why in Somatic Skins, regulation is never treated as the end point. It is one phase in a much larger adaptive cycle. The book, linked below, goes deeply into how nervous systems actually grow stronger, not just quieter or number. This is also why inside the Prestige, our academy for somatics, we don't remove resistance from the environment. We love tension, we love surprise, we love unexpected, we love edgy, we design it, we control it. We use it as a training stimulus so that the nervous system learns something new about what it can withstand and also how to play with it. The goal isn't to live inside stress. It's to stop being afraid of it. And if you've been doing a lot of regulating and very little adapting, that's not a personal flaw. It's just a missing ingredient. Your nervous system doesn't need endless safety. It needs the right amount of resistance met consciously and cleared fully. That's how resilience is built. Thanks for staying with me and hanging for a bit. Please do consider liking and subscribing. It helps the channel out, and I'll see you next time.